Hi everyone, this is the Ulrich Museum from home, for you at home right now. I'm Jo Cox, Registrar at the Ulrich, and I'm coming to you from the office that has taken over my dining room table to bring you another in our series of staff pick artist talk excerpts. The excerpt that I've chosen is from a talk given by Paris-based American artist Evan Roth in 2015 in support of a solo exhibition at the Ulrich that same year. And I want to also remind you that we have a number of engaging artist talks in addition to the full Evan Roth talk available through our website or directly through YouTube by searching for the Ulrich Museum of Art. Now the excerpt... Bless you. The excerpt I chose from Evan's talk is really about his journey to finding this philosophy that he now works from and within with his work. And that is centered on the idea of hacking or misusing a particular system. He had just finished up explaining an experience in grad school where he became fascinated in the action of activism. So gathering a number of people in a specific space that's perhaps not designated for or even permits the certain shared behavior that everyone's engaging in. And that gets him thinking about other systems that are in place and how hacking or misusing these systems, like I said, small or large scale, is really at its root kind of a problem-solving device. So I think this is particularly relevant today as we are now all tasked with having to hack every possible system in our lives, right? We are all figuring out how to problem solve, working from home, by homeschooling, socializing from home, entertaining ourselves at home, things like that. So enjoy the excerpt from Evan Roth and everybody stay well. Thank you, bye.
And so that was kind of in my mind as I was swirling around looking for new projects to do after I graduated. I was also kind of coming to the realization that I wasn't really in love with graffiti. Like I was more interested in graffiti because graffiti is a really good community of hackers. Like here's a community of people that are taking existing systems and using them for totally new purposes, right? And this is something I think it's really easy to forget because graffiti's been around for so long and it's kind of come in and out of fashion and we take a lot of things for granted, but there's, like it was, when someone took a can of spray paint and bought it at the hardware store and then pointed it at somebody else's property and wrote their name, that was a really interesting misuse, right? That was an interesting misuse of a product that's changed the way every city in the world looks now. And even with the trains in New York, you know, this is a different kind of information era. And here there's a system that they figured out how to misuse to like transport art all around the city in a time when you couldn't post JPEGs on the internet. And this also was a really interesting hack. Like this was a really interesting group of hackers. And so the kind of graffiti that I loved is the graffiti, like isn't necessarily the graffiti that, like what I love about this is the fact that it's abusing the system, right? And it's not the colors and it's not the can control, it's not painting that I'm interested in. It's like where you place those letters. What system are you hacking into? How are you completely changing the meaning of this structure with a very small, clever, playful intervention? And so this is a piece by William Lamson. This is probably my favorite graffiti project of all time. And the kind of hashtags at the bottom here actually come from hacking culture. Like these are words that describe how hackers approach problems. But when you look at those words and you look at what graffiti writers and street artists have been doing, like you can see that these are two groups of people who are thinking about problem solving in a really similar and a really interesting way, at least I think. So this idea of kind of unintended use is something that I kind of started looking at as, it's a way you could look at everything. It's just a lens you can look at the world on, is this idea of misusing the things around you. So like, you know, robotic vacuum cleaners, when you duct tape knives to, become much, much more interesting projects than their original intended purpose, you know? This is not one of my pieces. This is an internet meme called Doomba. It's incredible, right? And so those kind of ideas were swirling around my head, and I got an art fellowship at a place called I-Beam in New York, an art nonprofit that kind of specializes in art and technology. And I met some interesting people there. One of them was this kind of ex-robotics guy named James Powderly, and we started talking, and we said, why don't we take some of these ideas and we'll get these two communities talking more, these computer hackers and graffiti writers, get them in the same room. We always kind of thought of ourselves as Q in James Bond, like we weren't going to be the one wielding the gun, we weren't going to be the one writing the tags. We were going to be trying to supply this community of like graffiti writers and activists with new tools, right? We were going to be their kind of like arms dealer. And so the first project we made, which kind of launched the group, was this project called LED Throwies, which is the simplest electronics project you can ever do. It's essentially just a magnet and a battery and an LED taped together and then done in mass and thrown at things. It's like a pretty base, simple project. But when you get a community of people together to do this, it can turn into these sort of interesting actions. This was in Linz. They still had metal in their trains. Like when we did this in New York and we threw in at the train, we were like, this is going to be a great project, and the trains are all made of aluminum now, so of course it just bounced off. But in Austria, they still have steel in them, so it would work. So this was a moment and people really got, all we had to do was show up with this box and hand them out, and all of a sudden people were engaging in this public space project, perhaps for the first time. And we were releasing everything open source. This was much about spreading open source culture as it was about public space and getting people involved outside. So we would make videos like this and seed them on the internet and try to have them get picked up in YouTube. This is kind of in a pre-social web. But then we would always pair it with source code or how-to guides. We would always have this invitation for other people to come into the project. Like this wasn't our technology. This was something we were trying to make for everyone, right? And so we saw people using it. LED Throwies was crazy. Like the amount of people that used LED Throwies went way beyond our expectations. And in a sense, it was an inspiring first project for us to have because we saw how this could turn into everything from like marriage proposals to like pretty aggressive, like this is Students for Free Tibet in Beijing during the Olympics, right? So like that whole breadth of like, we saw like kids doing their first electronics project, and then we also saw it used for activist projects that we were happy that we could kind of help support in this kind of open model. And one thing we learned from that whole thing is that the bigger hack here was not the technological hack, but it was the social hack, right? So for example, like this photo showed up heavily in the New York Times and then bounced around the internet. And I'm pretty sure had they made this a standard activist banner drop, which we've all seen 100 times, this image would have not circulated around the web quite as heavily as it did, because we were playing into like this story that the media was wanting to write, which was technology is here, we're living in the future, you know, graffiti writers have lasers and cars are flying, you know, this was like the narrative that they want to write about. And so we started seeing that the media was reporting on projects that were using these technology that we were developing in disproportionate ways than they would have had they not used them. And so this was like a much more interesting hack to us than the technological hack. We like figured out this kind of like hack within the media that we could spread these ideas with.